Welcome to the Hair of the Dog podcast. I'm Nicole Bagley, and today I have my special guest, Jessica McGovern, and we are going to be talking about mental health and also how to continue to take care of our mindset and make sure that we are showing up in the best possible way, not only for our business, but also in our life. We have a great conversation coming up, so definitely stick around and enjoy.
Welcome to the Hair of the Dog podcast. If you're a pet photographer ready to make more money and start living a life by your design, you've come to the right place. And now, your host, pet photographer, travel addict, chocolate martini connoisseur, Nicole Bagley.
Hey everybody, Nicole here from Hair of the Dog, and I am here with my special guest, Jessica McGovern from That Photography Spot over in the UK. Jessica, welcome to the Hair of the Dog podcast.
Hello, it's really good to be here.
Oh, yay. I'm so excited that you're taking the time to share with us today. So excited to have you here. So thank you for that. Yeah, before we get started, do you want to just kind of give us a little background on you and your business and all that good stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I make videos about photography on the internet. So kind of like you really, Nicole, to be honest. So I kind of fell into it. I just kind of started it for fun. For fun. I started it for fun, I first started in 2014 and then just kind of stopped because I was like, I'm rubbish at this. And then I found those videos again in early last year. And I was like, oh, people want to watch this. And that shocked me. So I thought, I'll just do some more. Let's just, see this. And it was really fun. I just really enjoy the process of creating these videos. I love teaching. It's just two things that go great together. And then it grew. And now I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm trying my best.
None of us really do. Let everybody in there on a secret out there. We're all just like flying by the seat of our pants.
Exactly. 100%. Absolutely.
And I think it's funny too that, when I started my photography business in 2010, had no intention of it turning into this. Kind of like you, it's just like one thing starts to go after another. And yeah, I love teaching and I loved helping people. And then there was more opportunity to continue doing that. And it was so rewarding. And now all of a sudden I look around and I'm like, holy cow, how'd I get here? What happened?
It is just mad. Like you just blink and then it's like, whoa, okay, we're going in this direction and it snowballs and you just kind of ask people, what do you want? And then you end up just doing that. And then that's your life. And it's just like, what happened?
Yeah.
But no, it's brilliant. It's been really tough. The topic that we're going to discuss today, it's been hard. It's not been straightforward because I'm an introvert. I don't like being in front of the camera. Like I really don't. So it's been a massive mountain. I was going to say a learning curve, but it's not. It's been a freaking mountain,
Yeah. Right. Right.
So yeah, it's been interesting because a lot of the time I'm just like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Not that I don't know what I'm doing. It's just more like I'm having to push myself through so much stress and pressure and trolls and stuff. And it's just like, why am I doing this? I didn't sign up for that.
Oh my gosh, especially YouTube. All the trolls live on YouTube.
YouTube is by and large the worst place you can possibly be. To be honest, but like the trolls are really brutal, but sometimes they're not even trolls. Sometimes they're just people and they're just mean. It's brutal. Every single day we have nasty things. And sometimes it's just someone being a normal troll, and then other times it's really personal, and that's been an experience. And people are like, well, you signed up for this. I'm like, well, actually let me stop you there, my friend. No, I didn't actually. But yeah, you take the rough with the smooth, I think.
Yeah, no, this is a great conversation to have too of, this whole entrepreneurship, whether you're, a photographer or photography educator or anything where you're running your business, but especially in the photography world, whether photographing or educating, it's such a personal thing. Yeah. And so much of our personal blood, sweat, and tears and personal ego and all of those things are all wrapped up in all of the things we create, whether it's our artwork or education. And man, it is hard And I think this whole entrepreneur journey, it's like by far, it's trial by fire of personal growth.
Absolutely.
And, you know, anybody that's starting their business, if they think they're going to come into any sort of business, just be like, oh, it's all going to be sunshine and roses and everything's going to be perfect and there's never going to be a hard day. Well, you're very lucky that you haven't had the hard day yet, but they come and it's hard, and it can easily get derailed, and you can easily go into this place of, I'm not cut out for this. Who do I think I am? What am I doing? Forget it. I'm going to quit the whole thing. I mean, I know I've said all of those things to myself numerous times.
Yeah, I think I did that like yesterday. We're laughing, but I know I'm deadpan serious right now. No, I think it's so true. I think imposter syndrome is a massive thing that a lot of creatives have. I think just by nature of what we do, it's so subjective. Mm-hmm. Some people, you can't please everybody. And I think that's something that, well, I personally try and remember that all the time. So there's some statistic, don't quote me, but there is a statistic that 5% of people will just dislike everything. They just dislike everything. So if you can make sure that you're helping 95%, then we're doing a good thing. So I think it's the same in business. Business is inherently tough. I have seen that growing up. You know, my dad has had his own business, and I saw him proper graft. I barely saw him. It just wasn't there because he was always working. And that kind of work ethic, I think, is instilled into me. That's kind of why I am glued to my desk as well. Yeah. I don't know. But I think it's maybe came from him. But I remember there being really bad days with his business and seeing the fallout of things going really wrong, you know, being sued for this or, you know, having a massive issue, having a competitor steal his product, which did definitely happen on more than one occasion. He bought the company that copied him. That was his method of dealing with it, was he would just buy them out. I'm like, Dad, that's not the way to deal with this. But yeah, that it's been interesting to grow up with it, because I think a lot of people don't have that. They've got parents with normal jobs, and they go to work and they come home and spend time with the kids, and that's great. That would have been great. I'm saying that would have been really, really great. But me and my brother, we both have our own businesses, and we've always done that. That's just been what we've done. I think we grew up into it, but it's never going to be straightforward. And I think there's always going to be people waiting for you to fail as well. So you just got to kind of keep going. Try not to get too much in your head, which is so much easier said than done. Yeah,
absolutely. And, you know, it's also so much easier said than done to not focus on the perceived or actual comments that are negative. Because a lot of times, especially I think in our like photography creation, you know, if we're in the photography business, when we're putting out a new piece of work or a new image we created and we're really proud of it, we're really scared of, oh, people are going to dislike this and say something mean and say something rude. But really, truly, they usually don't for kind of when we're sharing our artwork on our things. It's so much in our head. But, you know, sometimes you get to these other things, such as on YouTube. That's where I get my meanest comments, is on YouTube. And
it's always YouTube.
Yeah. And, you know, everyone says, well, don't focus on it. But it's so hard. You read this and it's like, it feels like a dagger to your heart, and you're just like, oh my God, like you can probably just keep scrolling or not watch it. And these people that, you know, it's so disconnected because it's just behind a keyboard. So I think people feel empowered to just like, I've had a bad day, so I'm going to make everyone else have a bad day too, which, gosh, it's just so hard to deal with.
It is. I mean, there's been a couple of times where I try and take the like kill them with kindness approach. So if somebody's been really mean, which sometimes they are, and they kind of talk about me as though I'm not a real person. So they're like commenting and they're like, she's saying this and all that stuff. And so I reply like, hey, she here. And like,
that's pretty funny right there.
And she's trying to be like, not quite sure what's going on with you today, but I really hope that you're having a good day and stay safe and well, and you know, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Just be like, okay, I got you. And they sometimes really just do a 180 and they're like, oh God, she's real. Like this is
like, I'm not a robot. I'm an actual person.
She's a real person. And sometimes that's interesting because sometimes they'll turn around and they'll be like, oh, try and backtrack it. And just like, be a nice person. So I think YouTube is always going to be polarizing because it's not that regulated in terms of like YouTube itself doesn't do a lot to stop. Although they have very recently, they have started to put in kind of filters that screen things out, which do work. Sadly, I can still see those comments. They're just not publicly posted. But
that's when you have a team member go through those. You're like, I don't even want to know.
So like, plus Rachel does all the comments, and she'll sometimes say, have you been on YouTube today? And I'll be like, no. She's like, okay, don't. And I'm like, really?
Well, now I have to go look.
Really? Yeah. Sometimes I find like the worst thing for me is the stats, and it's the same across every single social media platform for every single photographer. You see people like a lot of my students will post on Instagram and maybe it didn't get as many likes as they wanted it to, and so they delete the post. I'm like, where did that post with the dog in the bluebells go? And they say, oh, it bombed, it did really bad, so I deleted it. And I'm like, I don't even do that for my own images, but I can really understand why people do that, because it makes you think, oh, that's a really bad post and it must be really bad and I don't know why people don't like it. And a lot of the time it's the algorithm that just picks something up and you've got no control. But the numbers are the worst thing for me, because when you, as you'll know, when you go into YouTube Studio, you get the stats and like it's the arrows, like, are you doing well or is it red? Right. Or are you doing really bad? You have the arrows there, and so they're not great. There was a set that I know Jared Polin, Frono's Photo, he did a video on it because they didn't update on the app, and it literally said, your videos are doing really badly this week, like in words. And that was really rough though, because I'm like, I know, I don't need you to tell me that.
Right.
I can see.
Yeah.
And then the other side of it is that in your content list, where you can see like all the videos in the list, I know this because I do it all the time. I go onto it on like a tab on half my screen on my iMac, and there's like the list of videos there. And you'll know as well as I do that right on the right hand side, there is the likes and dislikes for the videos. Yeah. And the first thing I do, the first thing that I don't know why, because I know I don't want to know. I know I don't.
No, it's just our human nature. We have to look.
I just have to look, and I'm like, okay, how many dislikes does this video have? And it's like, this is making me feel awful. I don't. And sometimes.
And even when the likes certainly outnumber by tenfold, like 100-fold, like we still just, our human nature is to focus on those couple of dislikes.
Like that one or two. And the funny thing is, I've said it before on my Instagram stories, because some people are like, why is there always just one dislike? I'm like, I don't know who it is, but they're helping with my engagement rating. So I'm kind of okay with it. But deep down, it does hurt. And it's like, I'm not going out of my way to try and please everybody anyway. So why do I care? But you do. It's just human. Yeah. It's just human nature. You just want to be liked because, evolution has meant us need to be social creatures, and we have to feel like we fit in. And if we don't fit in, then we're probably going to die in
kicked out of the tribe and eaten by a bear.
Exactly, 100%. Yeah. But unfortunately, social media has basically made this 3,000 times more intensified. Yeah. Obviously, that number was just made up, but intensified a lot.
For sure. Yes, 100% agree. Yeah, I mean, it's just so easy to get bogged down in that external validation, and not even for a validation of, okay, when this does well, I do well, I feel good. But a validation of, if this doesn't hit, like this new image that I posted, if I don't get 100 likes, then I'm not a real photographer. I'm not worthy. I mean, those are very real emotions that the people feel, and it has nothing to do with your image. And like you said, it could all be the algorithm. It could be that you posted on a Thursday evening and something else was viral or this or that, and it didn't get the engagement because your people were sleeping. Who the heck knows? Or maybe just people are having a rough day and they're just scrolling by. We make up all these stories in our head of what likes mean, what not likes mean, what comments mean, like just what anything means. We're just making up stories. And usually those stories are, things that don't always make us feel good.
No, I think it's really easy for us to kind of go down this rabbit hole, and it's next to impossible to do. But I do try and kind of distance myself a little bit from the numbers. I try not to look at the numbers if I can. If there was a setting on my apps where I could just turn them off, I honestly would. That's actually a really good idea.
Yes. YouTube, are you listening?
Hello. And Instagram. God, Instagram would be, you just don't look at the stats. It would be very freeing. I think it's good to not look. I don't look on Instagram, so I don't check how many likes a recent post has done, because I know that if I post, because my Instagram following is mostly dog photographers.
Yeah.
So I know that if I post something that's a human, it's going to do nowhere near as well as one of the dog pictures. So I don't get too hung up on that. But definitely in terms of Facebook is the most annoying one on the business pages, because Facebook doesn't like business pages getting any reach at all, ever. So on those ones, it can be a bit frustrating, because if you link out to anything, Facebook penalizes your post. So you can't add links at all, which can be really frustrating. And
then if you add Facebook ads, that's where the other trolls live.
Yes,
they live on YouTube and Facebook ads.
Although, to be honest, on Facebook ads is the one place where I like to bring it to the trolls in a way. Like, I work with them, or I have worked in the past, still do a little bit now, with big businesses. And so they've got massive ad budget. So you're thinking like 30 grand a week. So like £30,000 a week, or £30,000 a day in some cases on ads. And it's really fun to be the person on social media for that, because you're disconnected from it, because it's not your business. You're not emotionally invested. Yeah, you're not emotionally invested in that. But you're like commenting as the company. It's like this massive brand, international brand. You're like on the comments. And I just love to just throw them a GIF. I just get the GIFs out. I just try and have a bit of banter with them. And honestly, I find myself hilarious on these stories. I don't know what they think, but sometimes they find it hilarious. And a lot of the time, other people find it hilarious. So I find Facebook comments like sometimes the best, because you can GIF where you can't GIF reply on YouTube.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is so frustrating, because my life would be solved if I could just add some GIFs. Like,
like, that's all I need in life, are more GIFs. Need, like, on the phone, like, hold on, I'm just going to text you because I can't respond verbally to that.
Just like, what GIF illustrates the situation? There is a GIF for everything. Everything.
That's true. I'll have to add that as a special training, GIF training 101.
Oh my God. I remember when I taught my dad how to use GIFs on his iPhone. Oh my goodness. WhatsApp became so fun. He just reply every question we asked, he just reply with a GIF. It was great.
That's really funny. My mom's in that phase right now.
It's so funny. I'm like, Dad, you're going to have to use your words again.
It's like, nah, not yet. Not ready. Not ready. So what advice do you have for, let's say, those photographers that are, out there, they're getting their work out there, but they're just feeling just really anxious about putting anything out there? Do you have any words of advice for them?
I think it's difficult, because I feel the same way. So it's hard to be like, yes, do this, because you will feel completely free, because I can't promise that. But what I can say is that this time last year, if I look back at the photos that I was producing, if I compare myself to myself this time last year, 10 years ago, whenever it was, the progression has been insane. And in the last year alone, I just went and did my own thing and stopped caring what other photographers thought. And now I find myself getting hooked in. I've been really bad place mentally over the last few weeks. And I've realized exactly why. It's because I'm embedding myself in photography groups again. And it's that pressure. And as soon as I removed myself from that, in terms of, it's great to get critique and it's great to reach out for feedback. 100%, absolutely, would never disagree with that. I just think that it's good to get critique from people who you know and trust. So it's positive and constructive critique that you asked for, rather than it being unsolicited advice from the internet, which is a big thing. So I think it's important to know that my greatest progression and my best work has been when I've not cared about what anyone else thinks at all.
Mm-hmm. That's huge. And the comparing your work to your past work and only your past work is also huge, because I see so many people, they get so frustrated and they just want to hang up their camera and quit because they're comparing their first year work to somebody's 10th year work. You know, all of us started somewhere. All of us started with, I mean, I share some of my crap images that people bought, and I feel really kind of guilty that they bought those images.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, really? Oh my God. I printed that as an artwork somewhere in somebody's house. Oh, I'm so ashamed. Like, we've all been there, because you don't, like, you know, you don't grow up as a toddler, like with the, you know, like savant perfect photography world. You have to learn these things. So yeah, that comparison to other people at a different part of their journey is, I think, one of the most toxic things we can do.
Sure. I think, you know, social media is the world of comparison. Before, we only had to really compare ourselves to our immediate friends and family, you know, like our close circle, or if you needed to or wanted to, you could compare yourself to, you know, magazines or what was on TV. But you knew it wasn't real. It just seems like with social media, we see everybody else's highlight reel, which we do. We see everyone's highlight reel every single day. And you're comparing other people's highlight reel to your behind the scenes. And the two are never going to stack up anyway. But a lot of the time people say, you know, I can't do it. I can't do your style if they're on the course, for example. Can't get the backgrounds right. I can't get my composition right in camera. I can't do this, this, and this. And they're making a massive list. They started photography like a year ago or 2 years ago or something. And they practice as much as they can around their full-time job. And that's great. But they're expecting to be the running before they can walk in actual fact. I just say, look, it just, whoa, which is what you usually say, just whoa, like hold up and just go back and break it down. Just do it in like little bits. Nobody is going to get mad at you if you don't take an award-winning photo today, which is something I have to remind myself of every day. Yesterday morning, I was like heading out to a shoot and I was just like putting so much pressure on myself, like just piling it on. I was like, what am I doing? 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when I knew less and was a lot worse than I am now, I would have been so excited going out to that shoot. And now I'm like, I don't want to do it because I'm so in my head about how it has to be perfect. And I just thought that was ridiculous. So I put my music on really, really loud and sang all the way to the shoot. And I got there and I just had it. I was just like, you know, let's just have a good time. And the pictures are amazing.
Yeah.
I think we are our own worst critics, and we don't need to be, because we're all just doing our own thing. So just do whatever you want to do. I just saw a thread, actually, you know, funny that just before we had this call. Yeah. I saw a thread on Facebook from one of my students, and she won't mind me sharing the situation. She's learned this new technique where she does textures in Photoshop, and she applies them to all sorts of her images. She does lots of wildlife photography. Amazing work. And she's using her textures, and somebody's commented saying, you know, I think this would be better if the texture didn't cover this part of the image, whatever. And she's literally just replied and said, it's great that we all like different things.
That's a great way to comment.
And I was like, okay. That was good.
I'll have to put that in my back pocket. That's a really
good that we all like different things. But it is, you know, people say, you know, I don't like this, I don't like that. I think you should do this differently. And it's like, I think you should do this differently to be more like what I like.
Right. Exactly.
And that end bit is the point that kind of ruins the whole thing. I think it is, for me, as long as an image is technically sound, I don't care. I genuinely don't care. And I know some people would not care if it wasn't technically sound. That's fine. But for me, if it's technically sound, I don't care. It could be any style. It genuinely doesn't bother me.
Yes. Yeah. That's the technically sound piece. That's definitely, you know, something I like to teach my students that are early in their photography journey. It's like, all right, this is what makes a technically sound photograph. And, you know, and then once you learn that, then you're able to start kind of playing with different things. It's that same thing. You got to learn to walk, learn the rules, and then you can mix and match rules and do whatever you want to start to create different things.
Perfect.
And just follow what you love. One thing that I hear over and over again with the different people that I've talked to on this podcast, people that are killing it, people that are doing really, really well, there is a common denominator, and it is they are following what they love. They're following the path that they are aligned with. They're not trying to create art for somebody else. They're not trying to create the same art that somebody else is creating. Because I think a lot of us fall into the trap too of saying, oh, well, I really like that. And that person's successful with that style. So I think I'm going to create that same thing so that I can be successful too. But you'll be more successful if you actually create from something that you love and what's inside of you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think what you said is perfect, because I think it's great to learn with another photographer that you are really inspired by or whose work you adore. I think that's great. And I would always say to people, instead of doing a formal education like a degree, use that money and the time and go and see if you can spend it with a photographer that you know, love and admire, and do that instead. And I think it's good to learn these tools and techniques that other people have and know. So the workflows that say a European photographer might use, and then that's really geographically specific, but you know what I mean. So
right.
Different workflows, these different skills, these different elements that they bring together when they're shooting, and even different genres and different styles, and learn all of these different skills and techniques, and then just see what recipes you can create by yourself. But you won't ever go anywhere unless you fail. You have to make those little failures. It's just like dog training, if I'm doing, because I do positive reinforcement training, clicker training, I need them to make failures. I need them to make bad choices for them to know the good choices as well and what gets the reward. So I think it's the same when you're doing photography. You have to do things and go, yeah, no, did not work, not for me. That's okay. I will remember that and move on. So as long as you can self-critique your work and try not to compare yourself to somebody else, but to how you were yesterday or last week, there is a caveat around that though, because sometimes, so like I did some really good work last year, and then I've just felt like totally off my game. I can't do it. I can't get the same, it's just not working out. I can't get the same look. I can't get the same feel. The standard of work has dipped. And so I was like, I'm just going to give up, stop, which is just my head talking.
Right. I've apparently hit the best that I can do. I might as well quit now.
Well, I just with all those awards, I'm just going to retire now because I've peaked. That's it for me. But no, it's been really difficult to kind of come back and see if I can. I was putting so much pressure on myself to reach that level every day that I was just never going to reach that level again because the pressure was so high. And so I just kind of sat back and you know what, I'm just going to look at some things that I want to do, like personal projects, passion projects, and just look at it a little bit differently and just do something because I want to do it. So in February, we started a project. It's just about finished. We've got the first test print over there. So I glanced to my left, which Nicole will have seen.
But none of you guys.
None of you guys can. But yeah, they've got the first test print from that. And you know what? Just that experience of doing that for me, it's taken, what are we in May now? So it's not finished yet. And we're still months in. But that process of doing that and exploring that and just trying some stuff and seeing what works, it's been infuriating. But brilliant, so creatively freeing. I think everybody should do personal projects because that's why that's why you started photography in the first place. It was because you just enjoyed doing stuff with a camera. So why not go back to doing that if you're finding other things too difficult?
Yeah. And you have no pressure from what the clients want, because you are setting everything up for you to create something magical and amazing. And if it's not magical and amazing, then okay, we learned some lessons. What can I do to make that? And that failure, people get so scared of it, but it's a necessary step. I mean, I'm pretty sure all of us, when we were learning to walk, fell down a few times. Did we quit? No, we got back up and tried again. Probably even hit our head and, cried, hurt. But yeah, all of those things, you have to just keep on trying. And by having that failure, it also kind of creates a contrast of what we want and what we don't want. And if you never create that contrast, then you're never able to actually, figure out what it is, what direction you want to go in.
Sure, for sure. I mean, it's like, I know I put full edits on YouTube, which is something that I don't like to do because for so many different reasons. But primarily for me, I don't like to put the full edits on YouTube because people follow the exact steps at the exact values that are seen on my image that I'm working on their image. And then they get frustrated because it didn't look like my image did at the end. But we started at different places. And I'm working on a Sony. If you're on a Canon, you don't need to go anywhere near as far on your adjustments as I do, because Canon RAW files, as you probably will know from working with so many different students and different cameras, is that each individual camera system has a massively different variability in terms of the files. So I'll go further than maybe somebody with a Canon would, but someone with a Nikon could probably go a little bit further depending on which aspects we're looking at.
Yeah, right.
And so people are putting the exact same adjustments, the exact same shadows adjustments, the exact same radial strength, the exact same opacities on images that were shot in different countries, let alone different,
different lighting conditions, different lenses, the whole 9 yards.
And it's never going to look exactly the same. And it's that process of learning, that critical decision making. How much of this do I need to apply to get the result I want? That can only come through trial and error. It can only come. And sometimes I look back at my work from this time last year and think, I went way too far. That is way too strong. But
we've all done that too.
But we can't, you can't live your life just consistently going back to a piece of work and trying to make it perfect, because perfection doesn't exist. You have to call it at some point and just go, yeah, that's done now. Let's move on to something else.
Yeah.
But if everybody critically assesses their own work and picks 3 things that went really well and 3 things to improve next time, but frame it as a positive, and then actually work on those 3 things next time, it does genuinely change your mindset.
Yeah, I love that. That's 100% true. I think this business in general becomes such a hard business to be in because we're all mostly working at home alone. We have some friends on the internet, but then our internet friends, we usually find those in those groups where everybody's posting all those images and we jump down that comparison rabbit hole that never ends in a good place. And it's just so personal because it's a personal brand. Even if it's not your name, it's still you, and you are so tied to that business. So it just becomes a recipe for just really challenging headspace. I know one of the ways that I have found to try to get out of, when I feel like I'm in a funk, let me back up for a second too. And truly anytime that you feel just not positive, you're just like in that slump and wherever it is. I mean, it's because of something that you're saying in your head, because our thoughts equal our feelings. The thoughts lead the feelings. So whenever you find yourself just feeling kind of blah or bad, really to start to ask ourselves, all right, what am I thinking right now? Because a lot of times we don't even ask that question. We just continue to sit in that feeling of yuck. And sometimes then it spirals down and gets worse and darker. But really, whenever we start to feel that, just asking that one question of oh my gosh, what am I thinking right now? And then trying to kind of reframe it, or make a gratitude list, or I have a little list of 10 things to do, putting on the music and singing, or going outside in the sun, or, just some quick things to kind of get in a better mood. So I think it's one of the most important habits that we can try to have.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I saw, sorry.
It's okay.
It's not coronavirus. Probably. I can't promise it though. No, what I was going to say was, that's so true. I did an exercise last night. I mean, I will admit that straight afterwards, I sent my husband a WhatsApp message that read, and I quote, "I don't think this worked because I don't feel any different, but the exercise itself in principle actually is quite good. So you rate because usually it's in reaction to a positive experience, and you can add negative feelings to it. So if something goes really well, you can be like, well, that's only because it was a fluke. That's only because I did this, or say business is going really well, you could have a feeling that it's not going to last. It's going to fall apart. Someone's going to pull the rug out from underneath me is one of my sayings that I tend to use. And also similarly, if it's really bad situation, if something's going bad, you know, struggling to get clients, coming out of lockdown or whatever it might be, in those situations, you will have negative thoughts and negative experiences. And often, just like you said, you kind of frame it in a really negative way, in an unhelpful way. Should we say, is unhelpful. And part of this exercise is basically to list those things, those negative thoughts and feelings. And then there was another column that was next to it that said something along the lines of, but next time I'll remind myself that. So if you have a negative feeling, you feel like because business is going really well, it's not going to last, it's all going to fall apart, I'm not going to be able to do it, everyone's only here because I did one good thing and I can't keep doing that. Do you know what I mean? Anything that negative self-talk that you could have. And then you answer that, write down what you would do next time to remind yourself. And actually that was a really interesting experience to do because it was just so right. It's weird because both answers were right because they're so used to the negative talk, but you wouldn't say that to a friend. You wouldn't say that to, well, I don't know, you might do if you're a mean
Depends how much you like that friend.
You wouldn't do that to a loved one. You wouldn't say that to your child or to your spouse. Again, it depends who they are.
If you still like your spouse, yes.
This metaphor has fallen apart.
No, we get it. We get it. Child, your child. That one is unconditional.
Yeah, you wouldn't say that to your dog, should we say. You wouldn't say that to your child. You wouldn't say that to someone that you love when they need you to be supportive. So why are we doing that to ourselves? It's just strange because sometimes we can identify the thought processes, but we can't change them. And it's that interruption that we need to have a toolkit. And I started doing this. I've got a scrapbook upstairs. Again, you guys can't see, but I just pointed at the ceiling. I've got a scrapbook upstairs. I'm not a scrapbooker. It's not my vibe really. But I started doing like not clippings, but kind of printed out some photos from my phone and kind of went through a whole period of my life and just put in kind of not just the good stuff. So it was the bad stuff as well. So say like my granddad died in January last year. My other granddad died in May last year. So I couldn't go to the May funeral because we were in lockdown and you weren't allowed to. But I did go to the January one and we planted a tree. And there's a photo that we had on my phone of us planting this monkey puzzle tree at his grave. So it's really random. Sorry. But
good. This is good.
This is like me. This is just normal day. So I have like these pictures and they're not all positive, but for every year I kind of picked like 8 to 10 images and just printed them kind of super small, nothing fancy, and just stuck them in this book so that a spread is a year of life. And I did it at the start of last year. So 2020 didn't have a spread. And it was really, really good experience because I could look through it and I didn't just see the highlight reel. So I didn't just see, oh, this is all of my successes that I've had, because that's great. And I think it's good to look back and remember those things. But I don't think that necessarily helps when you're in a really low space. But what can help is seeing the bad times that you've gone through and are now stronger because of. So having that balance, because life is never going to be all good. It's never going to be, but then at the same time, it's never all bad. There's always good to find in every situation. So I then, at the start of this year, did 2020, and that was weird because it was like the first one where I've actually like had to do it for the year.
You're like, oh, here's my kitchen. Here's my living room. Here's more of my kitchen.
Exactly. And there was some things from like YouTube, there was something from the awards, but there was also like some bad things as well in there. It wasn't all great. I mean, I don't think I put a troll comment, but I probably should have. But there was like, my granddad's tree and there was some lockdown things. There was like, because we got married just after lockdown, so my dress fittings were all like in a mask with social distancing with the seamstress, which is interesting. The seamstress try and pin you into a dress while socially distancing is impossible. But like there was all these pictures and it's memories, isn't it? And I think if we're in a bad place, we only remember the worst. Mm-hmm. And if we're in a good place, or if we're in like an okay place, we only remember the good things. And we can be in a comparison spiral with other people on the internet. And it's like, I know people compare themselves to me, and I know that. And there's nothing I can do to stop someone from comparing themselves to me. But everybody sees most of the time my good stuff. Everybody compares their dogs to my dogs, for example, but they don't see my dog chasing after a deer in 4 fields away, because I'm not going to put that on a YouTube video.
Right.
So it's never going to be all good and all bad, but most of social media is everybody's all good.
Mm-hmm.
So also somebody else's, the grass is always greener was kind of where I was going to then, that like I get really emotional when I see children on other people's feet, so like other people's children on their feet, because I still have not been successful in that department, but we carry on. But having that, and I get really kind of upset and emotional about it, because I can't have that. I don't have that. And I want that. And I know that that's kind of an extreme example, but I think if a lot of people would look at me and go, I wish I had everything that she had. Mm-hmm. And I'm sat here going, I wish I just had your child. Mm-hmm. That sounded a bit creepy, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. Yes. Yeah. It's so easy to look and just want to trade places with whoever you happen to be looking at, because you just have no idea. But literally every single person has different trials and tribulations that they go to. And sometimes you know about them, and a lot of times you don't. So you have no idea what's going on under the surface.
Yeah. And I think we all kind of make these judgments or pictures about people, other photographers, a lot of the time. And they could be really negative and really damaging. And I think that if I saw something in a photography forum again, you just can't, it's just not a good place to be, is it? I saw something in it was a Facebook group, and it was actually really nice. Another photographer had been slating this photographer that was posting for something that they did. They were a newborn photographer, and they did poses in props. And this other photographer didn't do poses in props, but was saying that people who do poses with props are bad. They're, dangerous. They're, taking advantage of the child, all sorts of stuff. And it was interesting that the comments under that weren't like, what an idiot. Why would they say something like that? All the people commenting just said the same thing, in that if you have to pull somebody else down, you have to pick holes in somebody else to make yourself feel good or look good in a business sense or in a personal sense. That says more about you than it does about somebody else. But I think it's very easy for us to, and I think everybody's guilty of this. I don't think there's a single person on the planet that isn't. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I genuinely don't. That we all look at other photographers' work, and we will sometimes just pick faults in it for the sake of picking faults in it.
And to make ourselves feel better.
Exactly. And I think that's really bad. But I also think it's now so natural that it's really difficult to get out of. But if everybody can really just check themselves and be like, hang on a minute, that wasn't a very nice thing to think. That wasn't a very nice thing to say. I mean, I sit and hear on different Zoom calls and whatever, people, I don't know if you guys have a different word for it over there, but bitching. Yeah. So like people bitching about other people behind their backs. And like, I sit and listen to it, and I just think, Jesus, this must be what they do to me. You know, like this must happen to me. And then I find myself bitching, and I'm not that. I know some people say that, but I'm genuinely not that kind of person. And Dan, my husband, I was on the phone. I was partaking in this conversation, so therefore I was encouraging it. And he just looked at me like with this look of sheer disapproval. It was like when your parents were like, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed in you. And he looked at me, and I was like, what? And then I was like, oh. And I literally said, I'm really sorry. I don't feel comfortable joining in this conversation.
Yeah.
And just basically change the subject. But I think it's so easy for us to go down that rabbit hole, join into a Instagram group message, a WhatsApp message, a Facebook group, a YouTube comment. There's just no need for it. you know?
No, yeah. And I think it's something that it's other people are doing it. So you're like, oh, and then like, I think there's some kind of like subconscious brain, like you're part of that group. So you're
Tribal.
like, oh,
like tribe,
I'm part of this like group. And then we're this really tight group, but at the expense of somebody else. And nothing positive comes from that. And yeah, it's just the company you keep is so important.
Yeah. And I think if you partake in negativity like that in any aspect of your life, because it's not just it's in anything, but you will find that the more you partake in that negativity, the more negative your general mindset will become, because instead of looking for the good in things, you're looking for the bad all the time. And then that translates to yourself. So I think, I know it's really difficult. I know it's a bit, unicorns and rainbows and stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with unicorns and rainbows, but if you just try and see the good in situations, you'll find that then when you get hit with really tough times, you will be able to see the positive in that situation. And that can be really brilliant for your resilience. And it's strange how something so simple, just not bitching or not mentally even thinking, yeah, that's not a good picture because of X, Y, Z. There is obviously limits and barriers to all of these things, but in general terms, that can be really helpful and healing. And I think also it's good to acknowledge that you've done it. You don't necessarily need to tell that person that you've been bitching about them, because sometimes that's going to make the situation worse. Most of the time that will make the situation worse. But you can go, okay, that wasn't cool. That wasn't okay. And that didn't help them and it didn't help me. So let's not do that again.
Yeah. You have to acknowledge the situation of of your behavior, of just even to yourself. Like you said, you don't have to publicly stand up and tell everybody, but just to mentally say to yourself, oh, whoa, what am I doing here? Yeah. And to be able to make a decision to not act that way.
Yeah. And I think it's tough because I think throughout school, high school.
Oh my gosh. My daughter's in middle school now, and it's just like get more than two girls together and you're like, oh God.
Exactly. It's so normalized through everything, through media, through films, through whatever it might be. It's so normalized that it's really difficult to see that it's actually a really unhealthy behavior. I'm sure there's an evolutionary reason for it at some point or another. I think it's more of a tribal thing. You feel like you fit in, somebody starts that conversation off, and then off you go down that rabbit hole. And it's a bit like the comparison one, in that it's never going to end in a good place. It's never going to end in a good place. But if you train your brain to see things negatively and pick the negatives, then that's what you'll also do to yourself. Which can be really tough.
Yeah, I think one of the the easiest, but so many people think it's too easy to do anything, is even just to get in a little bit of a gratitude practice. Like, as cheesy as it sounds, to have a little notebook and like even every night before you go to bed, write 3 things that you're grateful for that day, or 3 things that went well, something like that you're proud of. It can make a drastic change. I know there's scientific studies of how many days you have to do it till it actually starts rewiring your brain. But I think a lot of people hear it and it sounds too simplistic and they're like, oh, it won't actually make a difference.
I think it's also good to look back on the toughest parts of your life, because I think most people have had some form of a disaster at some point, and some people, maybe more than half, have hit what most people would classify as rock bottom at least once. And I think it's good to look back at those times as well and see, okay, so this happened and it was really tough. What was the positive? Because there's always a positive that comes out of that. And if you can go back to the worst possible times in your life, the worst moments, and you can find the positives in that, then next week when your client annoys you because they do something, you're just like, you know what? I'm sure there's a positive in here somewhere. And then you find the positive, and then things start to become less tough. You start to be a little bit calmer and just realize that there's always going to be ups and downs, but in every situation, there is always going to be a positive. And I think that's really important. Do you know about the I don't know, Chinese proverb about the farmer with the horse?
No.
I've just gone really off.
It's all good.
So there's this proverb. I'm not going to try and do it word for word because that's not going to end well. I've not had enough wine for that. I've not had any wine, by the way, guys. No, although probably you might think different, but I promise I haven't. No, this proverb basically is about this farmer and his horse. So he lives in somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and one day his horse has escaped, and the neighbors were like, "Oh, that's such bad luck. This is really, really bad news for you. I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" And he just said, "Maybe." And the next day, the horses somehow came back, and they brought with them some new horses, like some wild horses, and they came back. And the neighbors were like, "Oh my God, that's amazing! You've got more horses now. That's such good luck." And he was like, "Maybe." And then the next day, the son was trying to ride one of the horses, the wild horses, and he fell off and he broke his leg. Do you know what? I'm doing this really well word for word, actually.
You got it.
Oh my gosh. So he was trying to ride this horse, and he fell off and he broke his leg. And the neighbors were like, "Oh my God, that's such bad luck. Oh, what's he going to do? He's not going to be able to work." And the farmer said, Maybe, right? And the next day, the military came, and they were taking the young men to the war, and they saw the farmer's son who had a broken leg, and he was left, but everybody else's sons were taken. And the neighbors were like, "Oh my God, that's what good luck. He didn't get taken. You're so lucky. You must be so happy." And the farmer said,
Maybe.
And so it kind of goes on and on.
Yeah.
And every situation, you can either ride the roller coaster, or you can just take a step back and just think, is this the end of the world? Probably not. Is this the best thing that's ever happened? Yeah, it might be, but it also might be a disaster. And I know that's really morbid, but having that kind of just back up and don't immerse yourself in it quite so much can be really refreshing as well, to just get a new perspective and just think, what would the farmer with the horse do?
Mm-hmm.
Probably say maybe.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And I find it sometimes helpful to remind myself, everything always has been fine. Like everything I'm still here. So it's all worked out, and it will continue to work out for however it's supposed to work out. And, my responsibility is just to try to approach each day and each challenge in a way that is proactive. And what's the word I'm looking for? Not beneficial, but something that's more helpful. So like in any situation, like you were saying with the horse proverb, it's like, "Oh, this is really bad. This is really good," because as humans, we want to label everything as bad and good, but it really just is. Yeah. And how we interpret it is up to us.
Definitely. And I think he touched on something a little earlier in terms of we all are alone, which means that we all have ourselves for company. And sometimes that's not ideal for one's mental health. That sounded very posh. I know I'm from England and I sound posh, but saying one in a sentence is not normal. For one's self. I do have some tea, but I'm not going to drink that right now. Yeah. In terms of the loneliness thing, I think that's really tough. I had my assistant came last Thursday, and she was sat at the table here, and we're going through some stuff, and she's really open about her mental health. I've always been very open about mine, and that's really useful because it means that if I'm having a bad day, I can just say, "Look, I'm having a really, really rough day," and she'll immediately understand and know what to do. And the same in reverse. And she was here, and I said, I'm just really struggling. She said, "You're putting too much pressure on yourself, and you're doing this." And she was basically being my amazing therapist for the time that she was here. And we were supposed to be doing a business meeting, and actually I had therapy for free from someone who's not a therapist, but it was great. And she was here, and she was saying this, and she said, "You know what? I think you've been in this room for too long. You're in this for too long. You need to not just get out and be by yourself. You need to just do some other stuff, do some things that you used to really enjoy, or try new things that you might really enjoy. And you've been in this room for over a year, not obviously end to end, but I've described it today to the client that came for the sales session. Because I do know her kind of reasonably well through other circles. So she does dog agility, so I know her through that, and so she knows dogs. So she said, "Oh, have you been, working from home throughout like the whole thing?" And I said, "Yeah, this is my crate." And she just
it's a decent size crate, but yeah.
She just looked at me. She's just like, "I guess it is." Yeah, this is my crate. And I'm in my cage. This is it. And I think I'm just probably going like a little bit mad with my crate training is wearing off, and I need to go and explore the wild world a little bit more.
Need some enrichment in that crate.
That social interaction. And like you said, all of our online ones are usually immersed in these groups that potentially are helpful, but maybe not all the time, It's maybe not all of the time. And I've got photography friends, but I also have non-photography friends. And when I'm really, really low, although I can speak to my photography friends for kind of like direct support and they can relate to that situation, my non-photography friends are sometimes the best because you just take your mind off of it and they completely take you into a different world. And also it's those people that think that you're a wizard. Like you're just actually a mythical creature because of your skills with a camera and Photoshop or whatever it is. And so actually being around them is great because you can say to them, oh no, I think I really screwed up this shoot today. It didn't go very well. I got my lighting wrong. And they're like, what? That's impossible. You're like amazing. You're the best I've ever seen, because they're not going in these circles and they don't see Instagram's highlight reel of the best dog photographers in the world because they don't go and follow dog photographers, Right. I think it's really useful because it just gives yourself a little bit of perspective.
Yeah.
Your client isn't going to be looking at my work.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say. Our clients are not following the best dog photographers in the world either. So when we have this, oh my gosh, they're not going to think it's good enough. They're going to love it because it's their dog.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was freaking out earlier on this week and I was just like, what happens if, they don't like it? What happens if, and I'm like, what am I doing? It's their dog. They'll cry anyway at the reveal. Like, it's going to be fine. There's no reason for me to be getting this wound up about it because you've got to think, what are you doing this for? What are you doing it for? Are you doing it for those other dog photographers? Are you doing it for your client? Who are you doing this for? And I think it's perspective in that, oh my goodness, they are not going to see somebody else's work. They're not going to be looking at it that way. They might have seen a picture and gone, oh, that's really nice. Can you do something like that? They don't mean recreate it to the nth degree. They mean just take a picture of the dog in a flower. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
I saw the floral pictures recently. I wouldn't know flowers around this. I saw a bluebell the other day and I got so excited. And I was like, I can't do a bluebell picture with one bluebell. It just works like that.
Photoshop. Yeah, it's just a clone.
It's like 400 cloned bluebells.
The exact same one.
Oh my goodness. No, it's so true. It's just so true. Just give yourself a break. It's easier said than done, though. And from the research that we did last year, we know that over 50% of the photographers that we polled have got markers for what would be classified as a mental illness, such as depression or anxiety. And it was interesting, actually. One of the questions in the study, the report, was, I think it was, did you move into photography as a positive life change? And because we had everybody's answers to previous questions about whether they were diagnosed with a mental illness, whether they had that previously or whether it's a recent one, and all that. And it was interesting that the vast majority of people who said that they had a diagnosed mental illness, mental health condition, the vast majority of those also said that they moved into photography as a positive life change. And then those people also said that they still experience their, markers, their symptoms, as it were, in terms of that. And so we need to maybe just take a step back and think, like, number one, if I'm feeling like that, more than half of the other people feeling like that for a start, in that you're just not alone. Even if you think you are, because no one talks about it, most people feel like that. And also, there is no gender, there is no race, there is no geographic location, there is no age where that was not true. It was the same across the board in terms of how people felt. And I think that's really interesting because I think sometimes men don't feel like they've got the permission to be, say that they're feeling low, whatever. But actually, the men that I know and speak with regularly, not necessarily mental health advocates by any stretch, like proper lads most of the time. But if you actually have a direct conversation with them and probe them on it, nearly all of them have imposter syndrome. Nearly all of them feel anxious about sharing their work. Nearly all of them do. So there's no gender difference, which I think is a big stereotype that happens.
I'm surprised by that.
Race difference. There's no age difference. Because I thought age as well. I thought age would be like a big one, like in that the much older generations.
Right.
I'm nearly 30, so that's my age. But the much older generations, I thought that they would have less of an issue.
Right.
Because we're all snowflakes and that's what we're supposed to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And you've been here longer, so you think you'd be more secure in who you are and
exactly. But no, it's relationships. It was just clear across the board, and it was really hard to read those responses, because some of them were like written responses, and some of them were really tough. Like there were over 500, and it was really hard to read some of them. But the best thing for me was that Jesus Christ, I'm not alone. It's not just me. And that feeling just made it somehow just easier to manage, in that this is clearly something that we're all kind of dealing with. So what can we all do? And what can the trade do? What can the industry do to try and shift this? And I think it will be a slow process, but I think the more that people talk about the tough sides of it, and the more that people talk about dealing with negativity and dealing with trolls, for example, like there's me sat like 1 a.m. how to deal with trolls, like me searching YouTube for like, how do I deal with trolls? How do you reply to trolls? How do you deal with trolls? Like my YouTube search history this week is like, how do I deal with imposter syndrome? Honestly,
right.
I just sound like it's probably my own fault. I'm feeding the algorithm with these things, but everybody has the insecurities. Everybody does. There is nobody, unless you are a narcissist or a sociopath, there is nobody, or a psychopath, either of those.
Interchangeable.
One of the above. Unless you are one of those people, you have insecurities. You will feel low. You will feel good. You will feel also happy. You will feel all of these different things. And that doesn't mean that you're bad. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It just means that you're human.
Yeah. And I think people,
like everyone.
Yeah, I think people need to give themselves sometimes the permission to feel them. Because like you said, too, especially for men, that maybe they feel like they're not allowed to feel that way. And I think even women will do that, too, where it's like, oh, I know I'm supposed to be positive, so I'm not allowed to feel this emotion. But we know, and I'm saying to try to reframe it, it doesn't mean that you can't feel it. You can feel that emotion, but then
acknowledge that it's there, but and like you say, acknowledge it's there. I try and identify why it's there, and then try and identify either what you can do to kind of combat that situation, what I would call kind of either eliminate it or manage it. So one or the other, and make a plan to do something different. And I am a firm believer that if you write down stuff, I'm not a journaler. I have tried. It's just not for me. I've got about 4,000 journals. That again, that's an exaggeration.
Like 3 pages written in. Yeah, and I'm like, that one's not working.
Exactly.
Guilty.
Oh my goodness. Don't look at my bookshelf. And sometimes I even like go back and just miss a few pages and try and start again. I still don't do it. So I've just got like a bit. Oh my goodness, it's so bad. But I've got all these journals, and I'm not a journaler. It's just not who I am. But I do give myself permission to feel awful, and I always try and work out why. What has brought me to this point? Most of the time, it's because I'm just really tired. Really tired. Everything is worse when you're tired. Everything is also worse when you're hungry. So if you're hungry or tired, just go and sort that out first. But yeah, most of the time, for me, I know that I feel a lot worse, and I take things more personally, and I'm also a lot more vulnerable and less resilient when I'm tired. So for me, it's really important that I try and get my sleep and try and manage my sleep and get as good sleep as possible. But it's obviously not always that simple. But in terms of, for me, I will also, I can't remember when it was, I think it was last week, I felt so low. And I was just like, I just can't put my finger on like what is going on. I think partly I was just really tired, but then there was other stuff playing in and other commitments that I'd signed up to. And I thought, actually, this isn't going to be healthy for me. This isn't a good plan. And then do you back out or do you not? Because then are you like leaving people in the lurch, or you've got all of these like mental things again, all these thoughts just going and racing. And she's like, you know what, I'm just going to go to bed. And thankfully, that was an option for me, you know, in the lifestyle that I have. And then I can just say, do you know what? I'm just going to turn everything off. I'm just going to go to bed. I got all of my urgent stuff done.
Yeah. And rarely do we have anything that is absolutely so urgent that we can't say, okay, I'm going to take care of myself right now. Whether, you know, whether it's food or sleep or just a little self-care of like, take your mind off it and go read a book about something that you find enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, I think self-care is important, and everybody has their own kind of stuff that as Rachel, my assistant and part-time therapist apparently, would say is that they like fill your jar up. So if your jar is empty and you're feeling really low, go and fill your jar up with things that bring you joy, things that make you calm, things that add to your resilience levels. And that could be singing really loud. It could be going and having a bath. It could be walking the dog. It could be painting. It could be reading. It genuinely doesn't matter what it is. But if one of your reasons for feeling low is that you're lonely, which I think is a common one for us, because sometimes we're only around our dependents in terms of kids or you know, family members or whatever it might be, or we're only around people that we live with, in which case there's those tensions, because there are tensions there, no matter how much anyone says that it's perfect to live with somebody else. If you live with someone else, there are tensions, leaving the toilet seat up, for example, you know? So there's always going to be these different things. I think if that's the situation in that you're feeling, you could feel trapped, you could feel isolated. It doesn't matter what you feel. I often sometimes feel claustrophobic, and that sounds really strange, but I just feel like everything's just getting a bit too much. It's like all just getting a bit close. And in those situations, one of the best things that you can do is go and socialize with someone else that's not in your household, which obviously has been next to impossible for the last year because of coronavirus. But there are still ways of doing that. You could go for a walk, but stay far apart or whatever it might be. Just being around other people is really helpful. I've really enjoyed this week because it's been the first week that I've been out shooting and doing sales sessions, and since the start of coronavirus, really. The first one that's been like a proper full-on week. And yeah, I was super nervous because it's been so long since.
Like, wait, do I remember how to use this thing?
How do I press the on button, you know?
How do I change this ISO thing? Well, what's going on?
Why is my exposure really bright? It's just like, I can't work out how to do this. And, you know, I did make some mistakes. I think everybody makes mistakes. Every photographer makes mistakes.
Yeah, and I think every session that I shoot, literally everyone, I don't know if there's ever been one where this didn't happen, where I came home and uploaded my images and I wasn't like, oh, I should have done that too.
Yeah, definitely. I think it like all the time. It was funny. I had a student here I was teaching in person, which was so nice because that's something as well that I've just not done for ages. Although it did mean I had to really clean. Well, I didn't. I think Dan did most of the cleaning, to be fair. But I helped and I supervised that situation. But no, this student came around, this guy, really nice guy. He was there for the full day. But part of the day, we were at the table and he was on his laptop and we were working on his stuff. I can't remember what it was, but I turned around and moved to the iMac, just to do something. And there was photos up from the day before, which was a test shoot, and they were in Lightroom. It was all the raw files, completely unedited, straight out of camera, you know, just straight out. And in my defense, they weren't as badly as exposed as my normal images are, because I always underexpose. I think it's historically a personal preference to just go and save the highlights to the nth degree. But these actually weren't that bad. It was a super bright day, to be fair. Anyway, these raw files came up on the screen, and it was like the Lightroom gallery view. So he could see maybe 12-ish on the screen, and none of them had been culled. They just were all straight there off the card. And he just turned around and he sort of paused for a second as I'm trying to like find the mouse and, you know, get to whatever we needed to look at. And he was like, wait. I said, what? And he said, they're your raw files. I said, yeah. He said, they look like mine. I'm like, what were you expecting here? You know? What were you expecting? I was like, yeah. I was like, of course they do. They're
That's
just
what
raw files.
Yeah, I think a lot of people too, they're like, I always hear people, oh man, I was taking action photos and I can't get them all in focus. I'm like, well, do you have some in focus? Like, yes. I'm like, great. Okay then. Like, not all of mine are in focus.
I said there's only been one time where I've had a dog run, full pelt straight at you, like a proper fast dog, not like a steady dog, like a fast dog running straight at you. And there's only been one time that I've got every single shot of a full burst.
Yeah.
Tack sharp. And that was on a Canon 1DX, like the most expensive at the time. It was like the most expensive. It was a good few years ago. It weighed about 4 tons. It was so heavy. But it nailed it. It nailed all of them. And I was just like, that was amazing. But I don't want that. It's too heavy.
Yeah.
It's too much money.
Especially when you put that 70 to 200 on it.
Yeah. And I was like, it was a student's camera, and because she was just like, I can't seem to get this bit right. And I was like, hey, let me have a go. And I was like, this is epic. I was like, I'm so jealous, but also not because of the weight. But that was the only single time. And I reckon that if, I'd have been working on a shoot and the dog hadn't ran exactly perfectly straight towards us, there is no way that would have all been focused. And it was funny. I was on the shoot the other day, and this guy didn't know how to use a camera, didn't know how to do anything. He was like, oh, I just bought a Sony camera and I thought that it would take good pictures, but it doesn't. And I was like, okay, what Sony camera do you have? And he said, I have the A7R Mark III. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? You spent how much on a camera? You don't know how to use it? Anyway, he had this camera, and he genuinely did not know how to use it, but he was expecting that because it was a good camera,
because it was a picture.
And he said, well, it says it's got animal IAF, but it doesn't seem to be getting them in focus when they run towards me. And I'm thinking, if he's on auto and on like a sport mode, it should get maybe a couple, because it'll be such a deep depth of field. It'd be such a small aperture in those situations, because they just ramp the ISO, don't they? And just have like on auto.
Yeah.
And I was like, do you know what? Actually, no, I don't find IAF. I find it amazing nearly all of the time, but it's perfect.
Right.
You still have to have a level of skill there, and you still have to have that practice. And even on the Sony A9, you don't get every single photo in perfect focus. It just doesn't happen. But I think maybe we should, people who are being watched for their photography, for lack of a better description, should maybe share the oops more, like the oops moments more, because then maybe other people wouldn't feel so bad for making a mistake. I don't know. I know I shot some of the shoot the other day at like a stupid shutter speed. Well, it was an action shutter speed, which also meant it was an action ISO in a very dark wood, but the dogs were definitely stationary. So it's like those situations, and I look back and just go, damn it. I should have switched that. And it's because we've just been doing action, but when you're like so in the moment. And you're just
I do that all the time. And you're like, I totally forgot to change my settings there.
But then if I go and post that to like Instagram or YouTube or something, and the settings are there, everybody comes at me like, well, the dog's not moving, so why did you shoot that? And I'm like, I don't care what the settings are.
Yeah.
Is it sharp? Is it well exposed? Great. Perfect. We're fine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, just depending how much you have to pull it up, and is there then like noise that you have to deal with and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, 100%. Man, this conversation has been so good. It's been so good. It's all things that people need to hear. I think you and I could talk on about all this stuff for like days.
Like, I probably could.
Well, what's that about good sleep that you wanted? Because it's now like almost 8:30 your time. So we're going to go till midnight.
I've not eaten yet. I need to go and eat something. I think I need to go prep for the shoot tomorrow. I've got, when you just don't put anything on charge, but you really should have put everything on charge. Yes. That's like me.
All the time.
I'm going to have to go around and just get everything out. I put it all on charge. I know all of my strobes are dead. I know they all are. I know that I've got stuff in the attic, the loft. Do you guys have lofts? You guys have lofts? You do, right?
Attic. We call it attic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Loft is like a living space that's open. So like we have a loft in our house, but it's just like a couch. Like on the top of the steps, it's just kind of like an openish room.
You would not want to be in my loft. Like our attic, going up there, I've got like loads of stuff because this is such a teeny tiny house. But so if I need to like put stuff in storage, it goes up in the loft in the attic. That's so weird. Oh, it was strange. But no, yeah, sorry. I do tend to talk.
It's all good. It's been so good. It's been so good. And I think so many people, at least half, will completely identify with all of the things we talked about.
At least something in that ramble was useful for someone, because if it was, then great, we've done good.
Yeah, no, I think it was, because truly all of us battle with one of these things that we talked about at some point. Sure. So thank you again, Jessica. Let us know again where everybody can find you online if they want to follow you, but be nice, obviously, because we're the Hair of the Dog community and we're nice.
No, if you're not going to be nice, then I'm not interested. Yeah. You find me on YouTube, really is this kind of like the main hub of everything. So that photography spot, it's not always about dogs, but most of the time I have access to 4 and dogs are great. So, so on there is the main place where we're at.
Okay, perfect. Thank you again for being here with us, Jessica, and everybody else. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Hair of the Dog podcast. If you want to check out the show notes for access to any of the links that we shared in this episode, as well as any additional resources, this was episode number 75. So simply go to www.hairofthedogacademy.com/75.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Hair of the Dog podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please take a minute to leave a review. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. One last thing, if you are ready to dive into more resources, head over to our website at www.hairofthedogacademy.com. Thanks for being a part of this pet photography community.